All right, we're going to continue reading with the Schaefer-Cox trial transcripts. This is day 21, Anchorage, Alaska, Tuesday, June the 12th of 2012. It's only 84 pages long. I don't know why it's only 84 pages long. Most of them are over 200 pages. Maybe they just had a short day today. I'm not sure. Let's get started here. Anchorage, Alaska, Tuesday, June the 12th, 2012. Call to order of the court, the dishonorable court, at 8:39 a.m. Defendants present, jury not present. The court, and you can announce that you rest. The court, and you can announce that you rest. Then when the jury comes in, bring in the jury, please. You're ready to go, Miss Hayden? Yes, sir. Rip-roaring and ready to go. The court, good morning. We finished with Mr. Barney on yesterday evening. And Mr. Dooley. Mr. Dooley, Your Honor, Coleman Barney's defense rest. The court, all right. We'll turn to evidence on behalf of Mr. Vernon, Miss Hayden. Miss Hayden, Your Honor, we call Gary Eichhorn. The court, if you'll just enter the witness box there and remain standing, face the jury in the dishonorable court, raise your right hand and be sworn. Gary Lee Eichhorn, defendant Vernon's witness, sworn. Thank you. Please be seated. Miss Hayden, sir, could you state your name, spelling your last name, please? Gary Lee Eichhorn, E-I-C-H-H-O-R-N. Thank you, Mr. Eichhorn. Are you employed? I'm employed by the Federal Public Defender's Office in Anchorage. How long have you been there? 19 years. Can you just give us a very brief, first of all, what position do you hold? I'm a computer systems administrator. Can you give us just a brief description of what your job duties are? I take care of the network, computer-related things, and other duties as assigned. So sometimes you're asked to do things that are not computer-related? Oh, absolutely. Okay, were you asked to do anything in regards to Mr. Vernon's case? I was. What were you asked to do? I was asked to see how easy it was to find inert grenade bodies on the internet. Okay, and did you do that? I did. And what did you find? I found a number of cities that had inert grenade bodies available. I'm sorry, let me start over that. I found a number of sites that had inert grenade bodies available. Sir, I'd like to show you a couple of exhibits. They're going to be brought up on your screen. I'll ask you to take a look at them. That would be LV-J and LV-K. Yes and yes. Okay, you've looked at both? I have. Okay, and what are they? They're printouts of the web pages that I went to. Miss Hayden, Your Honor, I would ask that LV-J and LV-K be admitted. Lamro, Dooley, and Traverso. No objection, no objection, no objection. Miss Hayden, Madam Clerk, if we can have the lights just for a second. The clerk, I'm waiting for him to admit them. The court, I didn't hear if everybody responded. Traverso already said no objection. The judge can't hear anything. Did you know that this federal judge was brought out of retirement to handle this case because there was no other federal judges that wanted to hear the case? Traverso, no objection for the second time. Dooley, no objection for the second time. Miss Lamro, no objection for the second time. The court, the dishonorable court. All right, LV-J, K, LV-J and K may be admitted. Defendant Vernon's exhibit LV-J and LV-K admitted. Miss Hayden, if we could just bring J up for a minute. Miss Hayden. And so when you did a search for grenade bodies on the internet, this is one of the sites that you found? It is. Miss Johnson, you could just enlarge the description there over to the yeah. And so what did you think this was describing? I thought it was describing a baseball-top hand grenade that is used in the military that had been demilitarized. That was inert, yes. Okay, and if I could have LV-K and if you could enlarge the description there. What about for this particular item? The same thing. This was a different type though. This is World War II pineapple hand grenade and it also was inert. And if you could just, does it represent that it's military surplus? It does. But that it's been demilitarized. Disarmed, yes. Okay, so as a result of looking at these two websites, what did you do? I ordered one of each. After you placed your order, well, let me just ask you, how did you place the order? You could place the order online. I selected each one to be put into a checkout and then went to the checkout and paid for them and had them sent to my home. Okay, and so after you ordered them, you said you had them sent to your home address? I did. Okay, and how did you pay for them? I paid for them with my own credit card. What happened after you ordered them? Well, they came after a few days, and when they came, I opened the package. How did they come in? In a box, you mean? Were they sent UPS, regular mail? Oh, no, they were, well, yes, they were sent regular mail, priority mail. And they arrived at your house. Yes, they did. And after they arrived at your house, what did you do with them? Well, I opened the box. Miss Hayden. Objection, relevancy. The court. The dishonorable court. He may answer. The witness. I opened the box and took them out and inspected them. Miss Hayden. What did you do with them after that? I brought them into the office and gave them to the investigator. Let me show you a series of photos that would be LV-L, M, N, O, and if you would just look at each of those and then we'll talk about them, okay? Have you had a chance to review those photos? Yes, ma'am. Do you recognize the subject matter of those photos? Yes, I do. And what is the subject matter? They're the grenade bodies that I purchased on the internet. Your Honor, I would move for the admission of LV-L, M, N, O, Miss Traverso, no objection, Lamro, no objection, Dooley, no objection. The court, all right. JV-L, M, N, O may be admitted. Defendant Vernon's exhibits LV-L through LV-O admitted. Miss Hayden. Let's just take these one at a time, Mr. Eichhorn. Let's start with L. What do you see here? What do we see here? We see the two grenade bodies that I got on the internet. And the one to the left, is that the one that you described as the description being a pineapple? Yes. Okay, and the one to the right is the baseball type grenade body. And let's look at M. What do we see here? We see the printing about the fuses on the top of the same grenade bodies. Okay. And again, the one to the left is a pineapple. Yes, and the one to the right is a pineapple baseball type grenade. And the one to the right is a baseball type grenade. And this is basically just the serial numbers from the fuses. Is that what we see? Yes. It's the type of fuse and the lot number. And what would be the square atom that you're looking up? You're looking at the top, up on the top. Yeah, there's some printing on the top of that. That's a spoon. The top number is indicating the type of fuse. In this case, it's an M213. Affirmative. And then the middle and bottom denote the lot number and the dates. And both bodies had this type of information on them? Yes, they did. Let's look at N if we could. And what are we seeing here? Well, we see here the two grenade bodies. The one on the left, the pineapple, has a hole drilled on the bottom. So does the one on the right. The drilling of the hole is indicative of the inert or a training device. And if we could go to Exhibit O, what are we looking at here? Well, here the two fuse bodies have been taken out of the grenade bodies. And did you have an occasion to remove the fuses from the bodies? Yes, I did. Did you examine them? Yes, I did. And what did you see? Well, I found that they were inert. They had been expended. That the fuses had been expended? Miss Lamro, objection, foundation. He's not an expert, Your Honor. The court. Miss Hayden, I can lay foundation, Your Honor. The court. Well, the objection sustained. Okay, the court loves Miss Lamro. She's just a good little devil Jezebel for Satan. Miss Hayden. Okay, the court. Oh, go ahead. Miss Hayden. Mr. Eichhorn, have you ever been in the military? I have. When were you in the military? 1970 through 1990. What position or rank did you hold? When I retired, I was a CW-3, Chief Warrant Officer III. What, if any, special training or position did you hold with regard to your service in the military? Well, I had multiple MOSs. My primary was a signals intelligence officer, and my secondary was a small arms repairer. And during your service in the military, did you have an occasion to use hand grenades? Oh, absolutely. Approximately how many times? I wouldn't even begin to guess. Okay, would that include both practice and live hand grenades? Oh, absolutely. Primarily with the practice yes, Miss Hayden, Your Honor, with the foundation, I would submit my question again to him. What did you observe about these fuses? The witness. Well, I observed that, Miss Lamro. Objection, Your Honor. The court. Oh, I think he may answer. The witness. I observed that the two grenade fuse assemblies were inert because the bottom portion, which should have been there for a live fuse, was missing. Miss Hayden, let me ask you just a few more questions. You say you had these grenades delivered to your private residence? Yeah, I did. At your private residence. Do you have a tap kit? I do. Can you explain to the jury what a tap kit is? A tap kit is designed to put threading in the metal, whether there's a male threading on the outside of a bolt or a female threading on the inside of a piece of metal. Do you have smokeless powder at your residence? I do. Oh my goodness. He's going to make an unregistered explosive device. And at your residence, approximately how many firearms do you have? Personally, I have about 35. Hey, I like this guy already. My children, I have about another 30 and 35, something like that. I like this guy. So approximately 60 firearms. Approximately 70, probably. 70. Sir, I believe that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Traverso. Which order do you want me to go first? Cross-examination by Mr. Traverso. Good morning, sir. Good morning. Can you tap Can you tap into a cast iron grenade body? I don't know. I never tried. Okay, thank you. No further questions. Mr. Dooley, I have no questions. The clerk, your mic, please. Mr. Dooley, I have no questions. Miss Lamoureux, the Jezebel devil, daughter of Belial. Good morning, Mr. Eichhorn. Good morning. I'd like to go ahead and show you what we've marked for identification as Government Exhibit 880. Oh, and we'll need to, sorry about that, which computer screen's here so that the defense counsel can see it as well. May I take it out? Question. Sure. Oh, please do. And I also like to think that we'll bring it up on your monitor screen there as well. Those inert grenade bodies that you just testified about, you purchased them from KarateMart.com website? Yes, ma'am, I did. Okay, and Exhibit 880 there in front of you, how many pages to it? There are 3 pages, ma'am. Okay, and is that from KarateMart.com website? It is. And did you go, there's a service tab on the website as well? Yes, there is. And did those pages appear to have come from the Karate Mart website? Yes, they do. The government offers Exhibit 880. Miss Hayden. Your Honor, it's hearsay. The dishonorable court. I don't know what it says, so I can't very well rule on that. Miss Lamoureux. We have another copy here, Your Honor. Miss Hayden. And I don't believe we've been supplied with a copy. Miss Lamoureux. It's pages from the same website that you just admitted in LV-J and LV-K. You should see it on your screen in front of you right now. The court. 880 may be admitted. Plaintiff's Exhibit 880 admitted. Miss Lamoureux. Madam Clerk, if we could have the lights, please. By Miss Lamoureux. I'd like to direct your attention to the last page. Yes, ma'am. And right above there's a section called Assumption of Risk. And right above the paragraph, just a half, yeah. If we could enlarge that section, hopefully you're able to read that there. Yes, ma'am, I can. Okay, do you see where it says, it starts saying sales of certain items? Yes, I do, in the middle. It says sales of certain items are governed by local, state, federal, and international law. Do you see that? I do. And that it's the buyer's responsibility to check all applicable law. Yes, I do. Concerning use, ownership, legal age, possession, and any product offered on this website. Yes. And then it says, by purchasing any item, the buyer warrants compliance with all local, state, federal, and international law. And the buyer is legally able to purchase the items. Do you see that? Yes, yes. And then it says, Century disclaims any and all liability related to improper, illegal, unintended use or modification of weapons sold through this website. Do you see that? Yes, ma'am, I do. And the purchaser, user, or participant assumes all risk of injury from use. Yes, ma'am. And then at that, I'm going to skip the next sentence about the years of age without parental consent. The next sentence says some weapons may be prohibited in your area. Please check each state statutes and local ordinances before ordering. Yes, ma'am. Miss Lamoureux, if we could have the lights, Madam Clerk. Miss Lamoureux. Do you have any information that Lonnie Vernon ordered grenade bodies through KarateMart.com? I do not. It was just the first site I found. Do you have any information that Lonnie Vernon ordered any grenade bodies from the internet at all? I do not. Do you know that Schaefer Cox told Lonnie Vernon to go to Anchorage to buy grenade bodies? I do not. And then Schaefer Cox described to him how he could stick ALS fuse in them and put gunpowder in them and seal it up. I'm not aware of that, no. Did you know that Lonnie Vernon talked about adding phosphorus to the grenades? No, I did not. Did you know that he wanted to make pineapple grenades usable? I believe I knew that. Did you know that he asked to buy grenades from Bill Fulton? I do not. Do you know that he told Aaron Bennett that he needs 50 fuses? I do not. Do you know that he talked about using grenades on law enforcement? I do not. One of the pages, I think it was on the baseball grenade page when you bought the baseball grenade off of KarateMart.com, there was a description and it talks about for the compliant department, pull pin. Oh, for the complaint department, pull the pin. Yes. Do you know if there were any recordings in this case where the defendants discussed taking grenade bodies and putting a piece of paper in to say complaint department, pull the pin? I'm not aware of any of that, no. Do you know the defendants were going to use grenades to stop law enforcement on the night of November the 23rd? Miss Hayden, objection, foundation. Miss Lamoureux at KJNP. Mr. Traverso, objection to the question, Your Honor. The court, the dishonorable court. Yeah, the objection sustained. Miss Lamoureux, have you seen the handwritten notes where it says, use grenades to stop? No, ma'am. Do you know that on March the 10th, 2011, Lonnie Vernon paid cash to Mr. Olson and bought grenades? I'm sorry, I do not. Miss Hayden asked you some questions about your time in the military and your own personal items that you have at home. Do you have live fuses at home? No, I do not. Did you plan to use those grenade bodies as weapons? No, I did not. Are you aware that new fuses can be screwed into those grenade bodies? Yes, I am. And then if you added a live fuse and gunpowder and somehow sealed the bottom, whether with a tap or tie-dye and die set or JB Weld or something, that would make a grenade. I believe that would work, but I've never done it, so I don't know. I have no other questions. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Redirect examination by Miss Hayden. Sir, let me ask you some additional questions about a government exhibit 880. Okay, do you still have that in front of you? I do. When you went to the checkout out on the internet and purchased those hand grenades, were you required to go to this page before you could check out? No, I was not. Did you read this page? No, I did not. Did you have to? Were you required to offer any proof that you were 18 years old or above? No, I think there was nothing like that. So you've never seen this page. Not before I got it this morning. And it wasn't a requirement for the purchase that you look at this page. No, it was not. That's all I have. The dishonorable court. Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Eichhorn. You may be excused. Thank you. You may call your next witness. Miss Hayden, Your Honor, we would like to call Special Agent Patrick Westerhouse. The court. If you'll step into the witness box there, face the jury in the courtroom, raise your right hand and be sworn. Patrick Westerhouse, defendant Vernon's witness, sworn. The court, thank you. Please be seated. Direct examination by Miss Hayden. Okay, I'm going to pause here on page 21. We'll pick up later with page 21. All right, we're going to start off with page 21 of day 21. This is the direct examination of Patrick Westerhouse by Miss Hayden. Good morning, sir. Can you state your name and spell your last name for us? Sure, my name is Patrick Westerhouse. Last name is Westerhaus. And sir, how are you employed? I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. How long have you been a special agent with the FBI? A little over 8 years. As part of your employment as a special agent, were you involved in the investigation and prosecution of this case? Yes, I was. As part of your involvement in this case, did you have an occasion to apply for a search warrant? Yes, I did. And was that a search warrant to search a couple of cell phones? Yes. Let me ask you a little bit about how an agent goes about getting a federal search warrant. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Sure, we go through what's called an affidavit process where we articulate that there's probable cause to believe that the fruits and instrumentalities of a crime exist in an entity or such things like a cell phone or a house or a mobile storage unit. You put a statement together, I guess I'd call it an affidavit, and you place that affidavit in front of typically a U.S. magistrate or a district court judge can review an affidavit, and upon reviewing that affidavit, then the judge will find that there's probable cause to believe that the things that are articulated from the four corners of the affidavit exist, authorizing agents and or other law enforcement entities to search for those illegalities. And so this affidavit that you prepare, it's under oath? Yes, ma'am. You swear to the information that's in the affidavit? Yes, ma'am. And that's presented. And this was presented to Judge Bryan? Correct. And including the information in the affidavit, you rely on your expertise. My expertise and the expertise of other law enforcement officers in the investigation, yes. Your experience, correct. And you said you confer with other law enforcement officers involved in the case, correct? Correct. You might rely on their reports, correct. Sometimes you rely on their physical surveillance, correct. You can rely on recordings, correct? Yes. So you oftentimes discuss your affidavit with other agents, correct? And you oftentimes discuss your affidavit with the prosecutor, absolutely. And so in this case, in applying for that search warrant for those cell phones, you filed an affidavit with the court, yes. And that affidavit was under oath, yes, ma'am. And you believe that the fact contained in the affidavit were true, yes. And you believe that they were correct, yes. And so isn't it true that the affidavit you filed for the cell phones, you said that you believed that Mr. Vernon's intention on acquiring a silencer was not on behalf of the Alaska Peacemakers Militia, nor was it on behalf of the Alaska Assembly Post. I believe I used the word related, not on behalf. Okay, we can use the word related. I mean your exact words. Mr. Scrocky. Well, objection. If she's going to ask questions about what he said, she should be accurate about what he said. Miss Hayden. Indiscernible. Mr. Scrocky. It's right there in front of her. Miss Hayden. Isn't it true that you said? The court. That's a fair observation, Mr. Scrocky. Miss Hayden. Isn't it believed by you that Vernon's intention to acquire silencer is not Alaska Peacemaker Militia nor Alaska Assembly Post related? Yes, that's what I said. Is that true? That's all the questions I have. Mr. Traverso, no questions. Mr. Dooley, no questions. Cross-examination by Mr. Scrocky. Agent Westerhouse, why did you put that statement down there the way you put it down in the affidavit? Well, the affidavit that she was specifically referencing in December was actually part of an affidavit that we used pre-takedown in March. When I signed it, it was March the 7th, and at the time before the search warrants were executed, there was evidence that showed Mr. Vernon had a personal use or was seeking to have a personal use for that silencer. However, there also evidence that showed during the investigation. Miss Hayden. Objection, narrative. Mr. Scrocky. What else did you have in mind with respect to the statement in that affidavit? As I previously testified, he had a personal use. However, there was also evidence that showed that Mr. Vernon was discussing with J.R. Olson that he wanted to kill cops. And during that investigation, it is my personal opinion that although he had a personal use for the silencer, that silencer could also be used for any violent confrontation with law enforcement. Let's explore that affidavit just a little bit. You talked about you originally had that affidavit on March the 7th? Correct. And that was for searches of the defendant's residences? Correct. And you applied to a magistrate judge in Fairbanks for that? Correct. And you used that affidavit for those residences and then later on for the search of a cell phone in particular? Correct. And that's the one Miss Hayden inquired to you about? Yes. Okay, so that was from March the 7th. And do you recall the date of the affidavit for the cell phone that you were inquired about by Miss Hayden? It was December. December? Affirmative. And when you made that affidavit, you had been involved with the investigation, correct? Correct. Listen to some of the audios? Yes. Not all of them. Not all of them. Okay, and you spoken to the case agent about the case as well? Yes. And when you reapplied, let me rephrase that. When you used the affidavit for cell phones in December, you still hadn't completed all your review of the investigation, had you? No. And in fact, even getting prepared for trial, you learn new things about an investigation, don't you? Yes, correct. So with respect to the statement that you made, were you trying to be accurate as to what you understood at the time? Yes. And has that changed in any way since you made that statement? Yes, as I said. Please tell the jury in what way. As I said, as the investigation goes on and as I had previously testified that in December, we were still analyzing the evidence and reviewing the recordings and the things and putting together the theory of the case. And based on the review of that evidence, it still had demonstrated that although Mr. Vernon had a personal use for that silencer, the silencers could still be used for other things. And some of the evidence did show, like I said before, that Mr. Vernon wanted to kill cops and was looking for a violent confrontation with law enforcement. And that silencer, although could be used personally for another matter, could also be employed to be used against law enforcement. Okay, are you aware from your involvement that Mr. Vernon and Mr. Cox and Mr. Barney were getting their silencers and grenades from that same source? Yes, and in fact, on March the 10th, Miss Hayden, Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is outside the scope of my direct. Mr. Scrocky, that's the only question I have on this topic, Judge. The court, well, pardon me. That's the only question I have on that topic. The court, well, I think it's a fair objection. Scrocky, no further questions. Anything further of this witness? Just one follow-up, Your Honor. Miss Hayden. Sir, you filed this affidavit in November of 2011. If I could look at it to refresh my recollection. Certainly. Miss Hayden, Your Honor, if I may approach. The witness, yeah, it is. It says November. Miss Hayden, and when you filed this affidavit in November of 2011, you believe that your statement that Mr. Vernon was not acquiring that silencer, that his intent to acquire the silencer was not related to the Alaska Peacemakers Militia nor the Alaska Assembly Post. Yeah, I still put that statement in there. Okay, that's all, thank you. That it wasn't related? Mr. Scrocky, nothing further. The court. Okay, thank you, Agent Westerhouse. You may be excused. Miss Hayden? Miss Hayden, Your Honor, Mr. Vernon rest. The court. Ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiff in this case, the government, has the opportunity to present rebuttal evidence. Miss Lamoureux, we are retrieving our witnesses, Your Honor. I don't know if we want to take a couple minutes to stretch it all. The court. I think we. Miss Lamoureux. Oh, here we go. Okay, the government calls Gary Kluka. The court. If you'll step into the witness stand there and remain standing, face the court, raise your right hand and be sworn. Gary Kluka, plaintiff's rebuttal witness, sworn. Kluka, direct, be seated please, direct examination. Miss Lamoureux. Good morning. Good morning. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your last name? Gary Michael Kluka, K-L-U-K-A. And where do you work, Mr. Kluka? Well, I work at Fort Wainwright. I'm an administrative law and ethics counselor for the Post. And how long have you been in that position? A little over 6 years. Prior to that, what did you do? I was on active duty. I was the operational law attorney for the 3rd Army. Woo! I'm a special guy. And how long were you in the Army? I've been working in the Army for over 34 years. Now, as an administrative law attorney, is that right? Yes. Is there any other way you can help the jury understand what your position is? I'm principally the attorney that the commander of Fort Wainwright, the garrison commander, obtains information on general law issues. If you want to think of it, I'm kind of like a city attorney for the garrison. I answer questions on operational law, on public relations, any of those sorts of things that don't fit specifically into another category. And so you advise on a variety of matters. Oh, that's correct. And who are you most frequently advising? Most frequently, it's going to be either the garrison commander or somebody on the staff. And you talk, there's one garrison commander, is that how it works? That's correct. Okay, and then how many colonels are on base? 0 to 6 colonels. There are four 0 to 6 commanders. Okay, there are some of the doctors are also 06s, so okay. But there are 4 406 commanders. The garrison commander is the commander of the 1st, of the 25th, commander of the 16th Combat Aviation Brigade. Well, he's no longer there, but he was. And then the commander of the hospital. Okay, so it's fair to think of you as counsel for those commanders. Oh, yes. Okay, now did there come a time when the defense investigator, Mr. Rowley Port, contacted you? Yeah, there was. And was there a point in time when Stephen Gibson contacted you? Yes, he did. And can you describe to the jury the proximity in time to each other in terms of when they contacted you? Mr. Port had contacted me 2 or 3 weeks before I spoke to Mr. Gibson. Okay, and when Mr. Gibson contacted you, was that the first time that he had reached out to you? It's the only time I spoke to him, that's correct. And approximately when was that, if you can remember? If, as I recall, it was like last summer or early fall of 2011? Of 2011, yes ma'am. And it is your understanding that was after Schaefer Cox had been arrested. I believe that's correct. Now I'd like to turn your attention to an exhibit that's already been admitted in this case, and that's Exhibit 878. If we could have the lights, Madam Clerk, if it's up to you, you can look at it on the overhead here on the monitor right in front of you on the left, whichever's easier. Have you seen this document before? Yes, ma'am. And how is it that you came to see this document? The document was presented to the Department of Emergency Services, and the director of that department brought it over to me, because although he did not believe this to be a valid document, I got them well trained to come to me when they have questions, when they have any questions. And he was asking whether or not this was a valid document. Objection, Your Honor. Oh, never mind. I'll withdraw it. Go ahead. Miss Lamoureux, and this was brought to you When you said Director of Emergency Services, that's on base, I'm assuming. Fort, that's correct. Wainwright? At Fort Wainwright, that's correct. Okay, now if we could enlarge this first paragraph, please. The paragraph reads, the Alaska Grand Jury de Jure, and then I'm going to skip the next portion. It says, hereby orders that Schaefer Cox, Marty Cox, and Seth Cox be at all times accompanied by armed personnel from the office of the Provost Marshal. Is that something that the military does? No, ma'am, we don't. We don't provide security for civilian personnel. In fact, at this point, unless there was some sort of change in our security policy, not even the Commanding General of the U.S. Army Alaska has such a security detail. And this here, it says, hereby orders armed personnel from the office of Provost Marshal who shall protect them by all appropriate means from arrest, detention, and or injury whatsoever, especially the actions of the Alaska courts of their officers operating outside of their jurisdiction. So, is protection from the Alaska court something that the military provides to individual private citizens? No, ma'am. Miss Lamoureux, if we could have the lights again, Madam Clerk. By Miss Lamoureux. On a separate topic, does the military have any authority or power to grant political asylum? No, ma'am, we don't. During 2010 and 2011, you were acting as a legal advisor for the colonels? That's correct. And do you know if any of them granted political asylum to anyone? No, they would have done. Nobody did anything of that nature. I contacted each of them to find out when this story had appeared in the paper to determine whether there was any basis of truth to any of that, and they all assured me that, objection, Your Honor, there was nothing. Hearsay, sustained. Now, does that colonel include Colonel Jones? That would. Traversal, objection, Your Honor. Hearsay again. Move to strike. It's the same thing. The court. Traversal, just a specified person, that's the only difference. The court. The jury should disregard anything that the Colonel Jones may have said to this witness. I don't know if the question was directed to did he see a particular officer or talk to him, or whether it referred to the part that where the objection was sustained. Miss Lamoureux, is it your understanding that no colonels on base granted any kind of asylum to anyone? Yes, ma'am, that is correct. I have no other questions. Cross-examination by Traverso. Good morning, good morning. Do you take notes of your contacts with people who ask you questions at times? Did you take notes of the request or questions that Mr. Gibson had of you? I did not. You did not? And if somebody comes on post believing that they can ask for help, but you are operating under the mistaken belief that they can get help, that doesn't mean that they are not trying to seek help, does it? Objection calls for speculation. Okay, let me ask you the question. Well, Traversal, this way. The witness. Okay. Traversal, and you can try not to be histrionic. And you can try not to be histrionic and just answer my question, if you will. Sure. You said that the post does not offer asylum, correct? The military in general doesn't have anything to do with the asylum process. But somebody could go on post and ask for protection, right? They could come and ask for protection, yes. Okay, and are guns allowed on the post from the civilian population? If they're properly registered at the front gate, okay. With the Welcome Center, weapons can be brought on post, yes. And is there a procedure that is employed to make sure that people go through that process? There is a gate guard at the front gate who is authorized to search the vehicle if he believes that somebody is bringing a weapon on improperly. Okay, do you know what that procedure is? Do they ask the person if they have a gun? They can, certainly, and I don't know that the specific standard operating procedure for the gate guards, but I'm sure there is one. Miss Lamoureux, Your Honor, this is going to be outside the scope of direct foundation too. The court. Well, I don't know what the next question is going to be. Traversal. Well, the next question is, if somebody is wearing a vest or body armor, would that be a telltale sign for a security officer to see if there's any weapons on board? I would think so. Miss Lamoureux, objection, speculation, the court sustained. Traversal. Okay. How many times did you talk to Mr. Gibson? I only remember speaking to him one time. But you don't remember when that was? Not specifically, no. And when were you first contacted by either the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office? For my testimony in this case? Yeah, it would have been last Saturday before last. And when you were contacted by Mr. Port, as I say, that would have been sometime last year. I can't remember, but I believe it was. It was either during the summer or early fall. And that would be after Mr. Cox was arrested, correct? I believe that's correct. and it would be referring to one of your soldiers that he wanted to have contact with regarding events involving Mr. Cox. Well, the reason I spoke to him was in order to determine whether or not he was going to appear in his official capacity as a military policeman or whether he was going to be appearing in his private capacity. In his private capacity, the Army does not have any concern as to what he's going to say or do. That's in his private capacity. If he's going to appear as a federal officer, then the Army's regulation AR 2740 requires that the staff judge advocate office make sure that the date's been cleared and that his unit knows that and that he is to do when he's to do it. And then he's actually here in an official capacity. Therefore, we're paying for the presence of that individual. A lot of determinations have to be made there, correct? Yes, sir. And time is of the essence, isn't it? Usually. And you are being asked questions regarding events that occurred over a year ago, correct? That's correct. And you don't have any notes, do you? No, I do not. Thank you, sir. No further questions. No questions. No questions. Redirect examination by Miss Lamro. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of Traversal's questions about the timeline. Affirmative. Is it your recollection that Stephen Gibson contacted you after Mr. Port contacted you? That's correct. And it was approximately how long after Mr. Port contacted you? As I say, it was about 2 or 3 weeks, I believe. I have no other questions. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kluka. You may be excused. The witness, thank you. Okay, we're going to pause here on page 41. 41, we're taking a break. All right, let's pick up with page 41. This is the direct examination of Watts. Miss Lamro. John, the government calls John Watts. The dishonorable court. If you'll step into the witness box here and remain standing, face the jury in the court. Raise your right hand to be sworn. John Riggs Watts, plaintiff's rebuttal witness sworn. The court, thank you. Please be seated. The direct examination by Miss Lamro. Good morning. Morning. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your last name? John Riggs Watts, W-A-T-T-S. And Mr. Watts, generally, where do you live? You don't need the specific address. In North Pole, Alaska. And how long have you been living in Fairbanks area? Since 1997? Were you involved at all with the IACC? Yes, ma'am, I was. Can you tell the jury a little bit about that? Well, approximately the early part of 2010, I was elected to the board of the IACC and performed various volunteer functions for that. And again, what does the IACC stand for? The Interior Alaska Conservative Coalition. And did you have any involvement with Schaefer Cox while you were on the board of IACC? Yes, I did. Can you tell the jury a little bit about that, please? Well, of course, we collaborated early on in various functions of the IACC, and we had a previous board member, and there were volunteer functions that we had done over time and those sorts of things. And specifically, I mean, you were aware that Mr. Cox was associated with a number of groups? Yes. And are there any specific groups that were associated with the IACC? Well, there was a separation point in there that Mr. Cox went kind of off on his own with the Alaska Peacemakers Militia, and that was not directly associated with the IACC according to my knowledge. And even specifically when that was created, the IACC put out several letters out specifically separating themselves from that organization, and it came into being as it came into being. Before we get to that, I want to ask you about the Second Amendment Task Force. Was there a relationship at all between the IACC and the Second Amendment Task Force? To the best of my recollection, it could have been associated with it, but I think his activities were largely separate from the IACC itself, though many of the people, including myself, that were involved with the IACC also went to various Second Amendment Task Force meetings and that sort of thing. You're familiar with the Declaration regarding the Second Amendment rights? Yes, I am. It was quite some time ago, and honestly, I don't know remember all the verbiage that was in there, but I do remember a declaration in general regarding that. And did you sign that? I did. And can you give a rough estimate of when that was? I would have to say that was probably 3, possibly 4 months ago, like late 2009, perhaps when I actually got elected to the board. It was sometime before that. Now, you mentioned that there was a parting of ways with Schaefer Cox. Can you tell the jury a little bit about that, please? Well, various individuals, including the IACC, had attended various public speaking engagements and so forth, and where they had heard Schaefer talk about the problems that he believed existed with, the government and various, agencies and troubles that the country was having. And even me, myself, I had, conversations at length with him regarding the content of these speeches. Specifically, I remember using the verbiage that bloody revolution, that he should avoid those kinds of, descriptions of solutions to the problems that were out there and that I traverse. So, objection, Your Honor. Could she ask questions rather than have narrative testimony, please? Sustained. So at a certain point, you indicated that there was a parting of the ways between IACC and Schaefer Cox, correct? And how was that separation expressed to Mr. Cox? There was a letter that was drafted by the IACC specifically separating the IACC from, any militia organization or any association with those organizations with Mr. Cox. And did you participate in drafting that letter? I did provide input to that, yes. And why was the IACC did the letter get sent to Mr. Cox? To the best of my knowledge, it did, though I didn't send it myself. Why did the IACC send him that letter? Well, it was over the concern, that the direction he was going, I and the others of the board fundamentally disagreed with that approach to solving those problems. And when you say that approach, what do you mean? Well, myself, I believe that knowledge, is a tool that people can use to decipher themselves as to how they need to solve problems, politically or otherwise. And when you suggest force to make people stop doing whatever it is they're doing as an individualist, supporter of the Constitution, I have to disagree with that. And so do the other members of the IACC. You mentioned that you had talked to Mr. Cox about your concerns. Yes. What did you tell him? Well, I just said that a minute ago, and am I allowed to repeat that? If you could. Well, again, if you talk about, overthrow of the government and bloody revolution and talk of, acts along those lines, though I must admit the speeches were quite some time ago, I don't have the specific verbiage. It was my judgment, that was improper, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And same with many on the board. Did you give any sort of advice or counsel to Mr. Cox? I suggested he stop doing that. And, if you know and suggest in public if there are issues to address, to do it in a fashion within the system. Do you remember how he responded to? Well, actually, I believe when he had the conversation that he, positively received that, and in future speeches it seemed to dissipate from the conversation. So, for a few months there it seemed to kind of simmer down, I guess you could say. So it seemed positively received at the time. And can you give a approximate estimate of the timing of that conversation? It was approximately March or so, sometime between the time I was elected to the board and, later events that happened in June. So March of 2010, correct. Did you also help run the websites for any websites? Yes, I did for the Second Amendment Task Force. I helped build a website for Mr. Cox. And also later I started building a Peacemakers Militia website. And at the time was very interested in exactly what the content of that was. And, my impression early on was that, traversal. I'll ask. Objection, Your Honor. Ask that the questions be posed to the witness rather than narrative testimony. He seems to be doing that. The court, that's a fair objection, Lamro. Did you ever join the militia? No. And how long did you actually get a website up and running for the APM? Yes, I did. And how long was that up and running? Approximately 2 months thereabouts, a month and a half. And about when was that? It was probably somewhere around March, April, May, somewhere in that time frame. And at a certain point, did you took these websites down? That's correct. And why was that? Well, in that particular case, though the information I had gotten was specifically describe any kind of, violence or anything like that, my exception to the whole idea was in the language of a manifesto, and I got to post on the site. Mr. Cox and others had themselves set up as generals and commanders and so forth, and it seemed a little ridiculous. I had spent 25 years in the military, and I know if they wanted to go play army off of in the woods, they were certainly welcome to do that. But just the general direction had been going and sort of delusional kind of language that was in there, and I didn't think it was a valuable use of my time. So that's why you took it down, correct? And the potential, I didn't see it was going in any positive direction in the future. Did Mr. Cox ever tell you that people were out to kill him? Not to my knowledge, no. Turning on June of 2010, did you attend the IACC fundraiser at the Far North Tactical? Yes. And what was your role for that fundraiser? Well, just generally to provide information for folks. I believe there was a petition going around relative to there was a wood stove ban, and was folks were trying to go to do up there, and we're having people sign that and just provide just general information about the IACC and help with serving people there, barbecuing, those sorts of things, just general volunteer stuff. And do you know Bill and Maria Rensel? I do. How do you know them? Through the IACC. Were they there at the fundraiser? I believe they both were. Certainly Maria, and I believe Bill might have stopped in for a short time, but I do believe they were both there. And did you talk to Maria Rensel that morning? I did. What did she tell you? Objection, traversal, objection, hearsay, Your Honor, the court sustained. Your Honor, Maria Rensel testified in this case, and she said that she didn't tell the court, well, wait a minute, it's offered as impeachment? Yes, Your Honor. Traversal should be outside the presence of the jury to establish that, Your Honor. The court, the objections overruled. Oh, my goodness. Miss Lammer, what did she tell you that morning? Well, of course, we talked about a lot of things, but I think the thing most important to us being here today is he was helping serve hot dogs. I think there was a sort of bun warmer off to the side, and I saw a group into the, I've thought a lot about it, and I can't remember specifically who was in it. I have individuals, I think, but I don't think it's really correct to. Let me go ahead and stop you there. What do you remember seeing that morning? Well, of course, there was myself. Tim Savey was there, and I believe there was an individual from down in Anchorage, and there was some sort of gun store and readiness equipment kind of store was there. I believe Aaron Bennett was there, to the best of my recollection. I believe his brother was there, Bill Maria. When you say Bill, you're at this Bill Rensel? Bill Rensel, correct. Okay, and various others that I don't remember what their names were. Did you see Safe Schaefer Cox there that morning? I don't believe I did, because I left relatively early. When did you leave? I think it was around noon, because my wife wanted me to be, spend the afternoon with the family. What did Maria Rensel tell you that morning? Well, I had seen that there was a discussion among several individuals. They seemed agitated, and that I was curious about them. I said, well, what's going on? And Maria said something to the effect, oh, there's something going on with Schaefer, some sort of plan he has, etc. She didn't want to get into the details, and maybe she said something to the effect, maybe you don't want to know, kind of thing. And she said, I'll talk to you later about it. And that seemed, a simple enough answer to me at the time, so I just shrugged it off and went back to volunteer work for the little bit of time I was left there. And do you remember, was this on a weekend? Yes, it was on a Sunday. And then, did you see her? Did you see Maria Rensel after that? Yes, to the best of my knowledge, she came the next day to my workplace, and she could have been there to buy materials. We sell construction supplies. I met her. She asked me to go out in front, or I may have been out there anyway. She mentioned to me that Bill, her husband, had been up all night, with Schaefer, talking him out of a planned traversal. Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. This is not impeachment. Miss Lamoureux, what Maria said. The court. Wait a minute. The objection sustained. You should go into this outside the presence of the jury. Do we need to do it now? Yes, Your Honor. All right. You can take a break, folks. All right. What did Miss Rensel jury not present? The court. What did Miss Rensel testify that you wanted to impeach with her later statement or her earlier statement? Miss Lamoureux, when she was on the stand, Your Honor, she said that she didn't talk to anybody about any plan that Schaefer Cox might have had. She didn't tell anybody about a plan. She didn't. Mr. Traversal, that wasn't accurate. That's not an accurate representation of what happened. Mr. Fulton was telling everybody about a plan that Schaefer had. She had heard that he had some sort of plan through Mr. Fulton and Mr. Bennett. That was what her testimony was. Miss Lamoureux, Your Honor, Traversal. So that's not impeachment. The court. Well, Miss Lamoureux, her testimony was that she didn't tell anybody about a plan at any point. The next day, based on information she had, she relayed information to Mr. Watts regarding the meeting the prior night, Sunday night. Traversal. The testimony in this case was very clear that Mr. Fulton and Mr. Bennett were talking and generating this rumor about Schaefer having a plan. Schaefer wasn't there at all, and when this was happening, he didn't say anything about any plan. And when he came over later on, as the testimony was borne out, he was surprised that testimony and that by the statement that he had some sort of plan. That was what the testimony was. I'm trying to find my notes here. Miss Lamoureux, Maria Rensel was the court. It's kind of hard to find my notes. You got a deaf, senile judge. He can't keep up with anything, man. The deaf, senile judge is just going along with the prosecutors. Miss Lamoureux, she was a witness called by Mr. Traverso. I can check my notes for that date. The court. Did she testify before or after Mr. Cox? Mr. Dooley, before. Traverso, she testified before. The court, I'm sorry. He can't hear nothing. Traverso, before. Miss Hayden, before. The court, okay. The clerk, it was May 31st that she testified. Miss Lamoureux, May 31st. Thank you, Denali. The court, all right. She testified after Bill Rensel, I believe. Was that after or before? The court, yeah, I have it now, right before. Just hold on a minute. Bill Rensel, before. Miss Lamoureux, I also asked her if she was aware of any plan to get warrants and pick up judges, and she denied knowledge. Well, just a minute now. What an offer of proof is appropriate as to what she said? My understanding is that the court, well, why don't you ask the witness, Miss Lamoureux? Okay, then we'll have it right. Vord Dyer. Miss Lamoureux, when she came by your workplace, what did she tell you? Answer, when we went off to the side there, she said that, that what had gone on yesterday that had come up in the meeting, she mentioned that, Bill had met with Bill Rensel. Bill Rensel had met with Schaefer, spent most of the evening or an evening into the morning, all night, I believe was her actual wording, talking with Schaefer out of a plan to get a magistrate to sign up some sort of warrant to pick up judges and hang them, was the wording I remember. Traverso, can the witness, and I will, Traverso, can I void Dyer, Your Honor? This I think is a question of timing here. I want to, Traverso, When was that day after the fundraiser, sir? Yes. Okay, and the fundraiser was in June of 2010? Correct. And this discussion took place in your office? No, it was out in front of the establishment where I work in the parking lot. Okay, and that was the next day? Correct. And that was referring to a meeting that occurred in the evening? Yes, the prior evening. Okay, so if the fundraising event was Sunday, to the best of my understanding, the meeting all night occurred Sunday evening. And then she came and told me Monday during the day, possibly afternoon. Okay, Mr. Traverso. Your Honor, I have to withdraw my objection because he's referring to the evening before the meeting that took place. Then there was a meeting. Mr. Dooley, well, I object to the hearsay within hearsay. The court, the dishonorable court. Okay, she testified that she did not tell anyone that Mr. Cox was going to get and hang judges. Is that what my note says? This appears to be contrary to the statement. However, it's hearsay upon hearsay, and it appears to me that the relevance is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. Oh, the judge is going to allow this crap. As a way to get evidence in that was not firsthand to her, came from an unknown source, whether it came from Mr. Cox or other people, it's not clear, and there's just more than heat than light here. Oh, maybe he's going the other direction. And the objection is well taken and should be sustained. Oh, maybe the judge is going to accidentally do something right here. Miss Lamoureux, so I cannot inquire of this witness? Is that your ruling? The court, you can't ask him what Maria told him on the day after the meeting, okay? Miss Lamoureux, even though it's contrary to her testimony? Oh, Miss Lamoureux, you're just so upset, ain't you? Miss Lamoureux, the court, even though that's contrary to her testimony. Miss Lamoureux, okay. The court, because it's of doubtful relevance, and in any event under Rule 403 should not be admitted. Miss Lamoureux, if I may, Your Honor. The court, yeah. Miss Lamoureux, we anticipate that this will be a main defense for the defendants in their closing arguments surrounding these events, and that's the reason we called a rebuttal witness in this topic. The court, well, I don't, more about what the defense is going to argue than I do, apparently. And, you think she's going to, do you think the defense is going to argue that Maria Rensel did not tell anyone that she understood that Cox was to get and hang judges? I mean, that's hardly a key to this case. Lamoureux, I don't think they're going to argue. I do not know exactly what defense is going to argue, but my understanding is that they have called all these witnesses in their case. They called Bill Fulton, they called Aaron Bennett, they called Bill Rensel, they called Maria Rensel, because they want to make the case all about that June 2010, those events. And they're going to argue that this was somehow instigated by Bill Fulton, and then they're trying to point fingers at what happened that weekend. And that's why we felt it necessary to call this rebuttal witness, the court, Lamoureux, based on information. The court, well, the relevance in my view is slight compared to the potential prejudice to this third level hearsay. Miss Lamoureux, yes, Your Honor. The objection sustained. Bring the jury back, please. Miss Hayden, Your Honor, I think this witness partially answered the government's question, and that should be stricken. The court, I guess you're asking for an instruction. I don't think one is necessary at this point. The court, all right. Yeah, he already partially answered it, and they won't strike it. Direct examination of Watts continued by Miss Lamoureux. Mr. Watts, we were talking. I was asking you questions about Maria Rensel. Came by your office the day following the fundraiser without telling the jury what she said. Did you have a conversation with her in a yes or no question? Did you have a conversation with her? Yes. What were your feelings based on that conversation? Mr. Dooley, objection relevance. Traverso, objection, Your Honor. The court sustained. By Miss Lamoureux, what did you do following that conversation? Mr. Dooley, objection relevance. The court overruled. The witness, well, I consider the conversation in the context of the conversation and the responsibility I believe I had relative to the information I gained in that conversation later that afternoon, and then I went home with work after work, and I talked to my wife about it and what she thought and where I believe my responsibility was, and then I called up the local FBI office and relayed that information in a phone message to them that I heard during that conversation. And what did you report to the FBI? That the objection is there's no objection, but Mr. Dooley, objection, Traverso, objection, Your Honor. The court, you're outside of the Traverso. Goes back to the same thing. The court, parameters of my ruling there. Traverso, we talked about that before. Miss Lamoureux, how did you call the FBI? The court, the dishonorable court. Well, wait a minute. Traverso, it's the same thing. The dishonorable court. Wait a minute. The objection sustained. Don't try to go by indirection what you can't do by direction. What's the next question? Miss Lamoureux, you're so sneaky. You're such a sneaky daughter of Belial, Jezebel, evil spirit. How did that information make you feel? Mr. Dooley, objection, relevance. Miss Hayden, relevance. The court sustained. Miss Lamro. Miss Lamro's just having a conniption fit. Miss little Jezebel, daughter of Belial, and her little, oh my goodness. Miss Lamro, have you had an opportunity to listen to that recording? I have. Mr. Dooley, objection, relevance. The dishonorable court. I don't know what recording we're referring to. Miss Lamro, have you listened to the voicemail you left for the FBI? I have. When did you call the FBI? To the best of my recollection, it was on the 14th of June, the evening of 14th of June, which was the day after the fundraiser. Question. I have no other questions. Cross-examination. Traverso. Good morning, sir. Morning. You mentioned that you listened to reviewed speeches of Francis Shepherd Cox. Yes. Okay. And many in person? Okay. Many in person. Okay, is there a speech? Is there a speech in particular that you're referring to, or more than one speech? More than one. Okay, do you have any idea where those speeches were made? Well, it was approximately the time between late 2009 to early 2010. And have you heard of the solution speech? I don't recognize it by that title. Okay, have you heard of a speech where he discusses let the government collapse on its own? You don't need to kill a wounded bear or shoot a wounded bear. I don't specifically recall that, but I can't say it doesn't exist. Okay, have you reviewed a speech that says tyranny self-destructs and you don't need to destroy that tyranny? Okay, I can't recall that specific language. Okay, and that liberty prevails and tyranny self-destructs. Have you heard that language? Perhaps. Okay, I can't say I can't. Did you tag it to a specific time? Did you call the FBI? Miss Labro, Your Honor, we would request that the witness allowed to answer. Traverso, I apologize. I might Lamro finish the answer. Mr. Traverso, be a little anxious here. I'm sorry. Traverso, go ahead. Did you want to say something more? Oh, no. Okay, I'm sorry. Affirmative. Did you call the FBI when you heard the quote, he wants to overthrow the government, unquote? Not for that specific quote, no. No, okay. Did you actually hear him speaking in person, or were you reading a speech? I heard him speaking in person at several different events around town. Okay, and you didn't call the FBI? I may have been remiss in not doing that. Okay, now back in when? 2009, correct. Can you identify a speech in which Mr. Cox specifically stated that he wants to overthrow the government? I cannot. Okay, can you identify a specific source of where you read that is a quote directly from Mr. Cox that he wants to overthrow the government? I cannot. And Mr. Watts, you're a strong believer in the Constitution, correct? Correct. You believe in the First Amendment very strongly, don't you? Yes. Thank you. No further questions. No questions. No questions. I have no questions, Your Honor. All right. Thank you, Mr. Watts. You may be excused. If you'll step in the witness box there and face the court and the jury, raise your right hand to be sworn. Arundel Brakefield, plaintiff's rebuttal witness sworn. The dishonorable court, please be seated. Direct examination by reptilian evil son of Belial, Scrocky. Morning, sir. If you could give us your full name and spell your last name. Arundel Brakefield, Brakefield. Mr. Brakefield, where do you live, sir? What city? Fairbanks. How long have you lived in Fairbanks? Since June of 91. And do you work there, sir? Yeah, I do. Where do you work? Polar Supply. It's a commercial construction supplies. Okay, you work with an individual named John Watts? John Watts, yes. He was just here, correct? Probably passing the way in and way out, correct? All right, and if you could give us you've been working in that same place since 91, or what's your history? What's your work history? I came up Fairbanks in the Army and got in the summer of 94 and stayed in Fairbanks. I've been working in the construction supply field for about 10 years. Excuse me a minute. Yes, Your Honor. I didn't get your last name. Brakefield, Your Honor. Brakefield. The dishonorable court. Okay, thank you. Scrocky. And Mr. Brakefield, do you know of Schaefer Cox? Yes, I've met him. Do you have an occasion to meet him? Yes. When was that meeting? Multiple times. I've met him as a customer. As a customer through your work, correct. And are you familiar with his work through the Second Amendment Task Force? Yes, I have attended some of the meetings. Okay. Were you a member of that group? Okay. And with respect to that task force, did you sign some declarations or anything with respect to something they were promoting? Yes, I certainly did. And what did you sign, sir? It was, I suppose, a declaration of intent to support one another if they were wrongfully accused of illegal possession or something like that. Possession of what? Of firearms. Okay, specifically firearms. All right, and with respect to your membership and your understanding of the principle of the Second Amendment Task Force, there was a provision that stated if you were a juror on a case, would you be willing to convict in a firearms case? Are you familiar with that? That does sound familiar, very familiar. Okay, is that something that you would subscribe if you were on a jury? I would still weigh the case, not the blanket. Not blanket. All right, you had occasion to meet Mr. Cox personally a while back, yes, and it was at a store, some sort of store function. It was an outdoor sale of some kind of fundraiser. I don't remember exactly that. And there was, give us a time frame first before you get to where. What was it was a time frame. It was summer about 2 years ago, and so summer of 2010, 2000, I think. All right, and there was a fundraiser being held, sir. A business called Far North Tactical. And why were you there? To buy military memorabilia and equipment. Do you have an interest in that, sir? I do. I collect it. What kind of stuff do you have? I have black powder, mortar, helmets, bayonets, old military rifles. Okay, so were you looking for things to buy, correct? And were you inside the store or outside the store? Outside. And did you bump into Mr. Cox? I did. Where did you tell the jury where you bumped into him? I was looking at an already used a demilled grenade body, and while I was looking at it, it was only like $2 or something. And while I was looking at it, Mr. Cox approached, and we talked about it for a moment. And one of the things we talked about was how one would rearm such a device. When you say talked about, who presented that topic for discussion first? I believe Mr. Cox did. What did he ask you? He said it was something to the effect of how would one make this operable again. Did you tell him what you thought about that? I told him my opinion, my understanding of it, how you could do it right. Tell the jury what you told him. That there's a hole in the body, and on the bottom of the grenade body that would have to be somehow sealed off, and then an explosive would have to be put inside, and it would have to be refused somehow. Did you talk to him about what type of explosive would go inside and about the refusing piece? Right. I said the most likely thing would be black powder, gunpowder, and some other things might be able to be put in there. But I didn't really know much about specific explosives. Know the names of a few, but I don't really know what they are. You mentioned one of them to him, did you not? ANFO? ANFO. Right. Did you know what that is? Fertilizer fuel. It's a fertilizer. What is it? Ammonium nitrate and oxidizer. Oxidizer being a diesel fuel? Apparently, yeah. Okay. So you talked about that too briefly. Yeah, that was just something that was mentioned as a possible filler. All right. If we could have the lights and if we could have LV-N, please. And Mr. Breakerfield, do you recognize that amongst these two items, which one we're talking about with Mr. Cox that day? That one on the right is most similar. This one there, correct. And so when you were holding was round as well, correct. All right, thank you. Could we have the lights, Denali? And how long did this conversation about recreating this grenade for the functional take place? I'd say less than 2 minutes, maybe 3. And was Mr. Cox's demeanor, what was it like? Cheerful, polite, interested? Yes, yeah. Did you end up buying the grenade body? I did, yes. If it's still not activated, on display in my living room. All right. You didn't fill the hole up and put the stuff in it, not in any way. All right. And you were at Far North Tactical, yes, correct. You mentioned anything about anybody trying to kill him while you were talking to him? No, not to me. How did he appear to you in terms of general demeanor and tone? Happy, cheerful, politician meeting the people. And this is out in front of Far North Tactical, correct? A lot of people there that day. Did you attend a meeting, Mr. Breakerfield, where Mr. Cox was talking about political matters? At the Second Amendment Task Force meetings, yes. Yeah, there was something he mentioned that concerned you. I thought it was unwise to use what I call the R word, revolution. Can you explain what to the jury in some detail if you can? What do you mean? What did he say that caused you to have some concern? Just the use of the word at all makes me nervous to be there counted amongst them. And what did you do in response to hearing that afterwards? Man, you gotta be. This guy was in. What is this guy? What kind of man gets upset about hearing a word? Oh, I've heard the word revolution. It makes me very nervous. What kind of people they got up in Alaska? Maybe he moved there. Maybe he's not really originally from there. And what did you do in response to hearing that afterwards? I stopped going to the meetings. You stopped going, correct? If I could, I'd like to clarify. Please. Yeah, a couple times it had been said at the meetings, and I think a couple times, just thinking it was, blowhard rhetoric, kind of, get us riled up for a cause kind of thing. But after a few times at the meetings, I thought I should probably separate myself from it. Because you kept on hearing it? Yeah, it wasn't a constant thing. It was just, mentioned here and there at the height of a speech or talk. Affirmative, but enough to cause you to quit going? Correct. Thank you, Mr. Breakerfield. Mr. Scrocky, that's all I have, Judge. Cross-examination by Mr. Traverso. Good morning. How many grenade bodies do you own? 3. Okay, how many firearms do you own? Around 30. Okay, 30. How do you have any J.B. Weld? No. What time of day do you meet with Mr. Cox? I believe it was a Saturday, but I work, so afternoon, I'm guessing, kind of late in the day. I believe it was probably soon after work, say 1 o'clock maybe. Okay, 1 o'clock. Is this the fundraiser of June of 2010? That sounds correct. Okay, and Aaron Bennett there. Was Aaron Bennett there? I didn't see him. I don't recall actually seeing him there. Breakerfield Cross. Okay, do people normally go up to tell you whether or not there's someone after them? No. Okay. No. All right. And when have you heard of Mr. Can you imagine meeting a stranger? You just met him in a store and say, "There's somebody after me to kill me." Like, even if it's true, you wouldn't do that. All right. And when you heard of Mr. Cox's speeches before, It was what drew me to go to the meetings in the first place. Okay, his speeches, have you? Talking to him as a customer. Okay. Talk politically a little bit. Okay, have you heard of his solution speech? The name of it does not come to mind. A speech where he is, have you ever heard on the internet, gone to YouTube and listened to one of his speeches? No, I have not. Have you ever heard one of his speeches? No, not a speech, no. Okay, all right. When you were at the Second Amendment Task Force meeting, did he ever discuss about the government's collapsing on its own and tyranny self-destructs? Yes. And that you don't need to kill a wounded bear? Correct. Did he say bloody revolution tomorrow? Let's get our guns and let's go? He never used the term bloody revolution, sir. Okay, thank you. Did he say let's have a revolution tomorrow, a week coming? Certainly not. Get our guns and go? No, sir. Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Mr. Dooley, Mr. Brakefield, I'm Tim Dooley. I represent Coleman Barney. Hello, sir. Morning. Do you have gunpowder in your home? I do. Do you do reloading? Yes, sir. Do you have black powder in your home? Yes, sir. No further questions. Miss Hayden, no questions. Okay, nothing from us. Scrocky, nothing from us. Okay, thank you, Mr. Brakefield. Thank you. The dishonorable court. You may be excused. You know you got a little break this morning, but the rest of us didn't. It's time we took 10 minutes. We'll reconvene at 10:30. All rise. This matter is in recess until 10:30. This portion not requested. And that's the end. I got the impression I don't have all of day 21. This ended at page 77. So I'm going to continue to look for the rest of page 21, but this is what's on the website. But I can't believe they didn't continue. I mean, it just said it's 10:30. 10:30. Anyway, we're going to stop this particular reading, this particular file on page 77.